The Nancy Drew Files, Case Number 1, Secrets Can Kill by Carolyn Keene. Chapter 7. Nancy wondered for a moment if she'd heard right. Did you say killed? Dead? As a doornail. But how? Nobody knows for sure. The girl went on. But somebody found him about 20 minutes ago. They say his neck's broken. She shivered. It's awful, isn't it? I heard the guy who found him is still throwing up. Personally, I'm sure I would have passed out. I mean, can you imagine? Nancy could hardly imagine any of it. All night she'd been gearing up, getting ready to face Jake Webb to accuse him, among other things, of trying to kill her. And in spite of what she'd told Daryl and Bess and George, she had been scared. Well, she wouldn't have to be scared anymore, not of Jake Webb. Still finding the whole thing unbelievable, Nancy reported the news to Bess and George. Then she climbed the front steps and went into the school. As she moved through the main hall, she heard bits and pieces of conversation that told her a little more about Jake Webb's demise. Right next to the video lab at the bottom of the stairs, hard cement stairs. Geez, no wonder the fall broke his neck. They say he's been dead for 2 hours. I wonder what he was doing here at 6 a.m. Probably planting a bomb. Too bad he fell first. Fell? The guy didn't fall? No way. Didn't you hear about his face? Jake's face. That's what Nancy heard most about on her walk through the hall. His face was bruised and cut. The bruises could have come from a fall down a flight of cement stairs, but not the cuts around his eyes, not his split lip. Jake had been in a fight before he hit the floor in front of the lab. And if that was true, Nancy thought, then he didn't fall. He was pushed. And if he was pushed, then her investigation had just taken a giant leap from vandalism to murder. No one she heard even pretended to feel sorry that Jake was dead, and as she thought about Hunk, Hal, Connie, and who knew how many others, she realized that a lot of people around Bedford High would have wanted Jake to vanish. But who would have wanted it badly enough to give him a push? When Nancy reached the scene of Jake's accident, the police and the man from the coroner's office were still gathered there. The body, thank goodness, was gone, but the chalk outline remained. She knew that if she talked to the police then and there, they'd listen to her. They'd probably even ask her to join the investigation. But if she did that, she'd blow her cover. And if she did that, she might as well kiss the secrets of Bedford High goodbye. Since the police were busy at the stairwell, Nancy decided that then might be a good time to check Jake Webb's locker. She wanted to look at the contents of the shoebox before anybody else got to it. What, besides Connie's bracelet, had Jake stashed away? She was so busy wondering if Jake's locker would have any clues hidden in it that she didn't see Daryl until she bumped into him. Daryl, hi! Even with everything else on her mind, Nancy felt a warm rush of feelings at the sight of him. I guess I don't need to ask if you've heard the news. Hardly. Daryl took her hand, but he did it in an absent-minded way. I just talked to Mr. Parton, he said, his voice low enough that only Nancy could hear him. He told me to tell you it's murder. Definitely. Nancy's eyes widened, but she wasn't really surprised. Did Mr. Parton say anything about me? About what I should do? Just that he wants you to stay on the case, Daryl whispered, and to handle it your way. Great. I was hoping he'd say that, Nancy breathed a sigh of relief and squeezed Daryl's hand. Now I can really follow some leads. She started to walk away, but Daryl held her back. Wait a second, he said. If Jake was the vandal, then your case is solved. You're into murder now, Nancy. I think you should back off. You've got to be kidding. Nancy couldn't help feel insulted. Why should I back off? Do you think it's too complicated for me or something? Hey, no, I didn't mean that. Daryl's violet eyes were full of worry. It's just that it's probably going to get dangerous, Nancy. You don't have any idea what you're up against. No, I don't, but I'm going to find out. Nancy smiled at him. Thanks for worrying about me. But please try not to, she said. Really, I can take care of myself. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Carla Dalton heading toward them, and she couldn't resist planting a kiss on Daryl's cheek. She wanted to anyway, but having Carla as a witness made it even more fun. Gotta go now, she told Daryl with a twinkle in her eye. I'll talk to you later, let you know what I found out. The halls were still jammed with kids discussing the morning's main event, but luckily the final bell rang as Nancy reached Jake's locker. She was surprised that everyone was still marching to the sound of the bells on that day of all days, but it was a good thing old habits died hard. The hall cleared in a matter of minutes. Nancy pulled on a pair of rubber gloves, no sense leaving fingerprints for the police, and quickly broke into locker 515. The shoebox was still there, but something else caught her eye first. With a grim smile, she pulled a pair of wire cutters off the shelf. Turning them over in her hands, Nancy thought how easily they must have snapped her brake cable. Underneath the wire cutters was a small black box. Nancy recognized it immediately as a battery pack for a video camera. She would have bet her $50 designer jeans that Jake stole it from the video lab and used it to tape her and Bess and George on their shopping spree. Finally, Nancy took out the shoebox and lifted the lid, her heart beating with anticipation. Connie's bracelet was still there, along with a recent article from the school newspaper that carried a picture of Walt Hogan being brutally tackled during a game. The headline read, "The hunk gets hit. He's down but not out." The story went on to explain that if Walt had missed the upcoming All-State Championship game because of injury, his badly needed football scholarship and his ticket to the pros might be in jeopardy. But Walt poo-pooed the injury, claiming that nothing would stop him from playing in the All-Star game. At the bottom of the box, folded in half, was a wad of official-looking papers. As Nancy opened them, she recognized them at once without even reading the heading. They were SAT exams. There was just one difference between them and the ones she'd once toiled over. The set of exams in Jake's locker already had the answers marked in. Nancy studied the curious contents of the box, trying to make sense out of them. She was positive now that Jake was the Bedford High vandal. The battery pack and the SATs pretty much proved that. But looking at the bracelet, she wondered if he was also into stealing. It didn't really matter if he was, except for one thing. Someone had killed him, and Nancy was determined to find out why. The police were going to be asking the same questions, she knew, so she put the shoebox, the wire cutters, and the battery pack back where she found them. She closed the locker door and was trying to come up with an excuse for being late to her first class when a voice behind her said, "Well, if it isn't Nancy Drew, girl detective. You always manage to be right in the swing of the nastiest things."